Since this is a Title V only webinar, I thought I'd give you a little bit of an update on our section. So we've had in the past year nearly complete turnover of our staff. So I'm the supervisor now, and Jeremy Arndt and Chris Kelmark are lead workers, and they've both been there for over 20 years. So we're very excited to have their expertise. Jeremy's going to be giving the webinar today. And then we have 5 new Title V permit writers. We have 4 that started last spring right after the lockdown started. And then we have a new one that just started this month, Derek Wiedemeyer. The good news is we are finally fully staffed, and 4 of the 5 are issuing permits, and we're starting to catch back up. So we're excited about that. We're very glad that you're at this webinar. I have a PowerPoint, and I am actually going to skip most of it because all of you except for like 2 people were in the webinar this morning, and I gave the exact same slides, but I will share some of them with you just for those 2 or 3 of you that weren't here this morning. So I don't think I need to go through this. Most of you are all familiar with this. Easy Air is our new electronic system to submit construction permit applications and Title V applications. It has data validation, so hopefully when you get your application, it will be complete. There are some fields that are mandatory, and the system will not actually allow you to submit the application if those are blank. Since your applications come in complete, with less missing information, then that helps us issue the permit faster. You can pay your invoices online. You can track your permit through the review status on your dashboard. One of the primary goals of the system is to reduce duplicative data entry. So this system is already preloaded with all of your equipment that was in Slice and Spars as of November 7th, 2019. The first time you use it for Title V, you will have to do some data entry because, for instance, Slice does not include any insignificant units, so you will need to add those. It doesn't include any monitoring equipment. You'll need to add that. Rated capacity is not a mandatory field in Slice and Spars, so if you didn't fill that out in those systems, you'll have to add it the first time you use this for Title V. If you've already filled out a construction permit application in Easy this year, all the information that you put in there will be available for your Title V applications. The system is voluntary. We do hope that you will use it. We review and issue all our permits through the system, so we can't work on them unless they are in the system. So if you submit on paper, we will charge you a nominal fee for data entry to get it into the system. These are our Title V usage rates. So you can see our total usage rate in the past 12 months for Easy Air is we're getting about 48% of all our Title V submissions in Easy. We're getting close to 70% of all initials and renewals submitted in Easy. And as you can see, we're still getting a lot of paper modification requests. That is because maybe some misconception that it's easier just to submit in a couple pieces of paper than fill it out in Easy. And one of the key things that Jeremy will be showing you this afternoon is how little information you actually have to submit in a modification request to process that in Easy. So you only actually have to submit the information for what you want to modify. You don't have to fill out the whole entire thing for every emission unit and emission point. So he'll be demonstrating that. Until this morning, 100% of the Title V initials and renewals we received this month have been submitted using Easy. We just got a paper one this morning. Today is the second in a series of 3 webinars. Construction permitting is tomorrow at 1 p.m. We are going to assume during this webinar that you already have your account set up, or you took the training on how to set up your account. So Jeremy will just take off running with how to fill out a Title V application. And the website for ER services is on the bottom of the page. You can find all the information you need for Easy Air, Slice, directions, FAQs, instructions, responsible official forms, training, everything you need for Easy on that website. You can also go to that website to log into Easy Air. Let's see. And just some more information of all the information we have posted on there. If you need help, the first point of contact is the Easy Air Help Desk. Please send them an email that goes to both Kevin and Jason, or you can call them. We prefer the email address. And then if they can't answer your questions about how to specifically use the system, if your question is more of how to fill out the information in the Title V or construction application, they will forward that to construction permit or Title V staff as necessary. In the case of Title V, that will go directly to Jeremy Arndt. So that's why he's here giving the presentation to you. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Jeremy.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Gonna get my screen shared here. I'm hoping you'll have to confirm. Maybe Marnie can confirm that I'm sharing the Easy Air screen here because I can't see what I'm. Okay.
It looks great. I was going to add one thing before you started.
Yeah.
Today's training is done in our test server. It's not the production server that you all use. This test server is used for multiple DNR applications, so it might be slightly slow during the webinar, but it won't be that slow in real life when you're using the production server. It's just the test server. We use this for water and all other applications at DNR. So don't freak out if it's a little bit slow today.
Yeah, and in addition to that, there are things, like Marnie said, since this is the test server, this is where we load patches before they get deployed to the production server. So there are things that are going to be loaded into this test server that may not be available just yet in the production server, but it's all currently under test, and we're working really hard to get all that stuff pushed to production so that they're synced up. But if I think about what ways or places where that's the case, I will try to point that out. So like Marnie said, my name is Jeremy Arndt. I'm one of the two specialist seniors in the Title V section. I was basically the lead Title V person during the development of Easy Air. So if anybody knows the ins and outs of what was done and why things were done, I'm the person there. So that's why I'm here today. So this screen here is what you will see as a regulated entity coming into the Easy Air system. This is your dashboard, your splash screen, whatever you want to call it. They call it the dashboard here. So we'll start by applying for a new Title V application. There's multiple ways to do it. As you see here, we have a big button here that says apply for a new submittal. You can also go to this submittal tab and start a new submittal. Whichever way gets you to the same spot. So we come down here, and depending on what roles and what permissions you have for your given facility, this will give you what your this will show you all of your application types that you have permission. This says water here, but it's not supposed to. It says air on the production server. But as you can see here, we have the list, and we have it divided out between Title V and construction permitting. This is a tooltip that you can see instructions for the Title V application for Easy Air. So this is a good way to just find general information about actually filling out the applications. This is one of our tooltips, just kind of tells you what it is, and this will actually show you the PDF versions of the forms, but they won't be fillable PDFs. It'll just be a PDF of what our forms look like. So in order to get our regular application started, we go to this Title V application and we click Start. This will bring you to our Form 1.0. Most of these forms should look relatively familiar to those who have done our paper forms in the past. We tried to mirror those forms as much as possible, and in many areas we actually streamlined some of the data that we ask for in the forms to more accurately reflect the information that we need to actually write the Title V permit. So the first thing, I guess the first thing that I want to let you know as far as the easier system is the save button is very important. The system, and you'll see as we go through, there are kind of multiple screens for some of these forms. And clicking this save button is really the important thing to commit the information to the system. Otherwise, it just kind of keeps it in the front end. And if you make changes and don't click save, you will actually lose that data. Thankfully, there are pop-ups that will come up and warn you about that before you move on. It will actually let you know that you'll lose the data if you don't save it. So save will save the information, keep you on the screen. Previous, I don't think that the previous button actually saves the information. So you don't really necessarily want to use the previous button if you can help it. And then the next button is actually a save and next button. So you will actually save and move on to the next form. Your question marks here is another thing that I'll point you to. Those are general tooltips for the individual field. They're a real quick little informational piece that lets you know what we are looking for. So in this first permit application type, you'll select initial, renewal, or modification, depending on what you're looking for. So we're going to start by doing an initial for this test. For application description, that's really left up to you. It's not mandatory. I guess one thing I will say is these red stars indicate mandatory fields. There are some fields that I'll point out that do not have the red stars by them yet, but they will eventually in order to indicate them as mandatory fields. If there's not a red star, there are given because that information that will help us on the review side. So as much information as you can give us would be appreciated in any of these forms. So this application description really just gives you an opportunity to give us some information as far as what the intent in the application is. It really comes in handy with modifications so that you can point out what equipment's changing and what the purpose of that modification application actually is. Then we go to our facility information, and you'll have a drop-down list, and that drop-down list will show you all of the facilities that you are associated with, either as a responsible official or a preparer. And you have to select a facility here in order to really move forward with any of the other application information. This pulls the information from the system into the application for you to use. So we're going to use this slice sample facility. And you'll see that the system is working to pull the information for this facility into the application. So your facility address, county, city, all of this information is unable to be changed because it's all stored within the system. If any of this information does end up to be different, there is a form on the ER services page in order for you to update that, and we will actually update that on our end. If you have a facility that has multiple EIQ numbers, you just want to make sure that the correct EIQ number is listed here. One major thing that we've seen a lot as applications have come in is for this permit contact information, it automatically loads the information for the person who created the application. So in many cases, that is actually a consultant that is contracted out by the facility. And so their contact information gets put in here. As far as permit contacts go, we require those to actually be somebody at the facility that we can contact that is employed by the actual company. So just pay attention to that and make sure that the permit contact, who should be considered a contact at the actual facility. And like I said, all of this data is pulled from your account when you actually create the account. The next section is your billing and invoice remittance information, and this is just who should be contacted for the billing information that comes along. You can click same as permit contact and it will automatically fill all that information out for you. As you can see, it filled all that out. Parent company information, that's only if it's applicable, so you can see that that is not mandatory. You can click same as permit contact or leave it blank, whichever way works or is appropriate. The next one is your facility total and then your designation of responsible official. Again, you can click same as permit contact if it is that person. Otherwise, you can fill out their information here. For ease sake, we're going to just use same as permit contact. And again, you'll see everything filled in here. The next is your processes and products. This is for your SIC and your NAICS codes. In many cases, this will actually get pulled from your would have gotten pulled from your SLICE submittal, like Marnie said, from November 7th of 2019. So you can just make sure that this is correct. If it's not there, you can just or you can use the drop-down list here. So we'll stay with that in both cases. And we'll click next, and it'll save all of that and actually send us to the next form. In order to make easier work with how things are required, we kind of had to change up our order. So you'll see here, we call this our wizard panel on the left-hand side here, and this is a way to jump around to individual forms as you're working through them. It's kind of like a TurboTax-like wizard, or like I said, you can click through next. One thing that Easy Air does, a little quirk that it does have, is it actually requires you to kind of lay eyes on every one of these forms. So even if you don't have any continuous emissions monitoring systems, you still need to at least look at this form in order for it to validate and move forward. So I like to just kind of put that out there up front so everybody understands that. So really, I really like to use the next button in order to make sure that each form gets looked at. So on this page, it's our Form 2.0, very similar to what you've always seen. Most of, if not all of this data for your existing equipment, again, that was in SLICE as of November 7th, 2019, will actually be here in Easy Air. We worked very hard to make sure that this emission point information is consistent with what's in what's in Slice and the construction permitting side. So for most of the existing equipment, you'll just have to go through and confirm that everything is correct. If you need to make changes, you can make changes. We'll just make that 2.80 and we'll click save. And for I kind of call it the emission point form, but it's not saved in here. So if you were to click on the CEO1 button, you'll get this error or this notification that says that you're going to lose any information that you had without saving it. So if you hit OK, you will actually move to that CEO1 form and that change won't take place. So we're going to click cancel and we're going to click save. And you'll see here that we have a green check mark that says saved successfully. Now, one thing I will say that we found out early this year is that at some point in the Easy Air patches, the ability for Easy Air to save partial information on an individual form stopped working. So the way that the system is supposed to work is you're supposed to be able to start working on a form and fill out most of the information or as much as you have at that point and save it and come back to it later. Unfortunately, right now it's not working that way. So if you save a partial, if you put partial information in, it will actually go away when you move on. So for right now, I would just really caution people to make sure that you have all the data in front of you when you're starting to go through each individual form set to make sure that everything saves as it should. It's unfortunate, but again, we're working with the developer to get that fixed. Just so we can go through kind of what the Form 2.0 is, I'm going to actually add a new emission point so we can start it over from scratch. So you'll enter your emission point ID, your emission point description, and then each one of these buttons, or most of these buttons, do actually, I guess, trigger other things. So if you do say yes here, it will ask you for which emission point this is a bypass stack for. If you click no there, it'll go away and it's not there. This discharge style, you'll see that if you select indoor vented or fugitive for discharge style, you'll see that most of this other stuff that was required or was mandatory before is now not mandatory. So you don't have to fill that stuff out. But if you click it back to vertical or downward, those remain as required. Stack shape and dimensions, or Title V, we actually ask for that in feet. I'm not quite sure why it keeps telling me my internet connection is unstable, but we'll hope that we can keep going through that. But it is actually listed in feet here. That's the way that it is in SPAR, or in, I'm sorry, Slice. So we just made it a direct conversion. So make sure that you're not putting 100 in there for circular diameter, because that is actually listed as 100 feet. So we'll say 1.25 feet for our circular diameter. We'll do a 25-foot stack height. We'll do our flow rate of 25,000. You can select whether it's ACFM or SCFM. And then we have this question here, is the stack temperature ambient? And you just answer that yes or no. If you answer no, it will actually ask you for that temperature in Fahrenheit. If you select yes, it will just let you move on. So we'll click save there. And we'll close it. And then, like I said, we'll click save, confirm that we've got it saved successfully. There's our new emission point. And then another thing, and we'll get into this a little bit more with modifications, but this include and submittal, these checkboxes here, that actually controls what equipment is checked for validation. So if this blue box is checked, every field in that form for that piece of equipment will be validated at the end. If this box is not checked, it will not validate that, but it also will not save any of that information into the system to be used in a future application. So just keep that in mind. And like I said, that becomes a lot more important in modifications than it does in an application. If you are going through your initial or renewal application and you do run across equipment that has been shut down or removed from the facility, uncheck the box for include and submittal. But then we also have a form on our website, on the ER Services website, where you can submit that information to us and we will actually make that inactive in future applications. So that the unit doesn't actually get deleted, it just gets made inactive on our side. So we click next, and the next form that we go to is your control equipment form, your CE01. Again, just the way that that we have to work through to make sure everything gets saved, this made the most sense. So again, your CE01 is going to look very similar. One thing that will have changed is this type of control equipment. Again, that comes from Slice, and that's a required field in Slice. Excuse me, so that's why it is in this form now. So do your best to select the appropriate type of control equipment type. If you can't find it, you can always go to other control device. And then in this description, you can actually describe specifically what that control device type is. If it is in this list, say a Cyclone, that description will actually go away. So we have our equipment ID, and again, this is all pulled from Slice, but you'll see here that the date of installation is not pulled from Slice, whether it exhausts the atmosphere, how you do your control equipment or your control efficiency. Now, this is one of those places where controlled pollutant and associated emission point, these are actually mandatory to include at least one for each one of these pieces of equipment. So even though right now they don't have the red star by them, they are required, and it will give you a validation error. Let's see if it will do it. So you'll see here, I tried to save that, and it said at least one controlled pollutant must be selected and at least one emission point must be selected. Those red stars are coming. They're just they're not in there yet. So we'll associate our control equipment. We'll use our pollutant code. Again, these come from Slice, so you can either do PM or VOC or SO2 here in the pollutant code, or you can type it out in your pollutant name and it will actually search. Well, you didn't do that one, so we'll do PM here, and then you can actually select you can select one. You can actually select all three, and we'll say we'll do your total capture efficiency, your control equipment efficiency, and then your combined control efficiency, and we'll click save there. And so you'll see that it actually applied those to the PM 2.5, PM10, and PM. But if you wanted to go through and actually say, well, I'm going to say that this is actually 90% for PM 2.5, you can go in and you can just change it for PM 2.5, and you'll see that right there. And again, you'll see that here, that it actually changed it for PM 2.5, but not either of the other ones. We do have then your emission point where you have to go through and apply it. And then click save. And so that one, you can see here that it saved that equipment type. Might have left all this other stuff blank. So that's the information that we have for that unit. So we'll click next and we'll see, there might be information missing from other ones. Nope, I guess not. When you click next, if there is information missing in any of those forms, you will actually get an error message at that point, and it will tell you that you have information missing. Your ME form is for your continuous emissions monitoring equipment. Just be aware that it's not intended for continuous pressure drop monitors or temperature monitors or anything like that. We're looking at actually continuous emissions monitoring equipment here. This information does not exist in SLICE, so therefore there will not be monitoring equipment associated with your facility. So the first time equipment. So very much like our paper forms, we're going to fill out the information, date of installation. We'll do model numbers and model name just because. We'll do a 2021 model year. Your type of system is how you actually acquired data. So we'll just use computers since that's most of them. And then it'll be, this question asks, how often does your system record your values? So we're going to say 15 minutes. And then you can add any additional comments in this area here that you would like. For this form, we kind of did things a little bit differently. So you'll see that we really have kind of all of the types of monitoring equipment that we would most likely see. You can associate another monitored pollutant if you need to, and it doesn't fit in any of these areas. So if you end up, what you would do here is you'll actually go through and you'll delete any of the pollutants that are not monitored by this piece of equipment. So we're going to go and we're going to do PM, SO2. We're going to say that this is going to be a NOx and a carbon monoxide monitor. We'll also do dilute H2O or O2 as well. So we've got these four things that are associated with this piece of monitoring equipment. One thing you will have to go through, it does require you for at least one of the pollutants where it's appropriate to click in that view as to whether or not that a performance has been done. If it's not applicable for any of the pollutants you're monitoring, you'll just have to click in one and click no for both of those. But if it is applicable, any of them that it is applicable for, you click yes, and then you can put in your date and whether it passed. So that will get us past validation for this form. And again, we go in and associate our emission point on this one, and we click save. And again, we can click save here. confirm that we have saved successfully, and move on to our Form 3. Our Form 3 will look very similar. For an example, I'll show that some data will be imported from Slice. In this case, it'll be your emission unit ID. And again, emission unit type is a field that comes directly from Slice. It is a required field in Slice. So we had that get migrated over into Easy Air, and then in order for us, we have to have this emission unit type. So again, find what is most applicable. There are a few others in case you can't find something that is directly applicable to that piece of equipment. We'll just leave it as other evaporated sources. We give your emission unit description. And again, we have your name of manufacturer, your model number, model name, serial number. All those they're not mandatory. They're helpful in many cases, but they're not required. The application won't be deemed incomplete if that information is not there. It doesn't mean that we won't ask you for that information in the future if we are doing our review and coming across something that we need that information, but it won't be deemed incomplete just for not having that. So your date of construction is a required field. Date of construction is typically the date at which the general construction started of the equipment. Date of installation would be the date that the equipment actually started up and was started operating, and then your date of modification. Again, these are not required fields, but if you have it, we would prefer to have it included in the application. Next field is SCC number. This is SCC is most equipment that I've seen that has gotten migrated from Slice actually has the SCC listed. But you'll see here that the SCC number is actually listed twice here. And that's just, for some reason, an artifact of that information being migrated. We, again, are not deeming applications incomplete because the number is listed in the SCC description. If you want that description there, let's see, I can't remember if, yeah, so since that SCC already exists listed here, it won't allow you to search for it again. So we're going to delete that. And we're going to do a search by that number. And you'll see that it shows up, and we'll click select and we'll click save. And here it shows up with the code and the description listed here. Again, that's not required, but that's how you get around that. For equipment that might have multiple SCCs based on multiple fuels, dual fuels, or whatever the case may be, you can go in and you can associate multiple SCCs. I don't know. Okay, we'll try that again. So you'll see here that it comes up with, you can just put partial numbers in and it will give you the whole list that meets that search criteria. So the more numbers you can put in, the more accurate it will be. So as you see here, now we have 2 SCCs listed here. Then we go to this raw material box. I know this isn't necessarily appropriate for this equipment, but this is what we're going to use. So we're going to, again, search by your fuel or your raw material, and you click it and click save. You can actually do multiple raw materials. Here we have fuel oil. So we have the ability to put multiple raw materials in, but we don't have the ability to put multiple maximum design rates in. So what we would prefer that you do is if you list multiple raw materials, pick one of the design rates and include that in this box. And then in a calculations page, you're going to have to let us know what the appropriate raw material and rated capacities are for each one. That can also be put in the part 2 form that we'll talk about a little bit later, where you can match those up. And then you'll also in that calculation form have to show us how you did your potential emissions for that unit based on those multiple raw materials. And we can I'll discuss that here a little bit going forward. This raw material list that we have here, we pulled from Slice for raw materials that have ever really been used. So if there's something there that that does not meet exactly what you are using for raw material, do the best you can, get as close as you can. And again, you can always, in that part 2 form, give us the specific raw material name, and then we can always take suggestions if we need to add things to that list at another point. So those are just kind of a couple things with raw materials that I wanted to address. This federally enforceable operating limit is the same that it's always been on our Title V forms. This is text and numbers. You can put whatever you need in there. Your permit or rule establishing the limit is just like it's always been. Most people put the permit number there. And for this one, we're going to say that the maximum design rate is 10 million BTU per hour. And so you'll see here again that we have a rated capacity unit list. This is consistent with the construction permitting sections, the construction permitting forms, so that we can be consistent when we port stuff over. So we're going to do 10 million BTU per hour for this. And then we're going to associate our control equipment. One thing that people have noticed for this control equipment is, say if you have this control equipment that's associated with that unit that came from Slice, it will be, what it was migrated at. If you made a change to that control equipment name on the CEO1 form, that new name will not be associated with that point or this unit. So you'll actually have to go through and you'll have to, kind of like what I did with that SCC, is you'll have to delete the one that's associated there and then associate the new name, and that new name will actually show up in this association table. Just another one of those quirks that from the system, when it is loading this information, it's actually taking a snapshot from when it was that application was last done, and it's not really giving an updated as you make changes there. Associate multiple pieces of control equipment with a single unit. You can associate your monitoring equipment, and the same thing, you can associate multiple pieces of monitoring equipment. For an example, we'll go through and we'll do a second piece of control. And so it will list both of associated emission point, very much like that the piece of control equipment that I talked about later. It won't, or earlier, it won't update in this form 3, so you delete it and you can bring it back. And again, you can actually do multiple emission points associated with a single unit. And you'll see that all 3 of those are there. And then we get into our associated potential emissions. So again, we'll do PM, and we'll actually click all three. And so, like I said, with a dual fueled, you'll have to. There's a couple of ways to do it. You can go through and you can do the emission factor based on whichever one of the design rates that you picked. So, for instance, in this case, we did natural gas, and so we picked a million BTU per hour design rate. So we're going to use an emission factor based on that. So we're going to do 0.076, and some of you remember using SPARS and that it had a auto calculation feature in it, and Easy Air does as well. So as long as you pick the correct design rate, or associate the design rate with your factor units, it will actually do the auto calculations. So here we'll do pounds per million BTU, and it actually did all the calculations for me. We'll do your AP42 as your source of emission factor. And if you go through, you can actually go through and make any changes here and that you need to based on construction permit limits, your combined control efficiency. So we'll just say that 90% control efficiency on this. And so if you either hit enter or you click down to the next box, it will actually do the calculation for you. Say you have a construction permit limit of 1.2 pounds an hour here. You can tab over and it will actually do that calculation for your potential annual controlled tons per year based on that pound an hour. So wherever you enter information last in these really four boxes is what it will do the calculation based on. Let's say, like I said, in this case, we've got fuel oil involved as well, and we want to do a combined potential annual controlled tons per year based on a kind of either a combined emission factor, or we want to do the calculation somewhere else. And so say between the two, we decided we wanted to keep doing things this way to keep the auto calc as much as we can, but we came up with 7.5 tons per year of annual control emissions from the two fuels. We can put that in here. You want to make sure that your potential annual controlled emissions in tons per year is the number that you want to show up on our form 1.5, where it actually calculates the emissions for the facility. So it will go to this box and it will actually calculate everything for you. So you want to make sure that that is the final number for that emission unit. That way, like I said, it will kind of be less work on the form 1.5 to kind of adjust things to make sure that you're meeting you're listing out the totals that are there. Another example that we run into often is we have one emission. We have an emission point that has multiple pieces of equipment associated with it, and all of the emissions we want to assume to one place or one of the emission units instead of trying to equally calculate them per emission unit. You can say your potentials for VOCs is, or your limit is 25 tons, and that applies to all four pieces of equipment that are associated with that emission point. You can put that in one of them. Here we'll do a different example of that. So we're going to say that between SO1, SO2, and SO3, we have a 25-ton per year limit on VOCs. So we're going to go down here, we're going to associate our potential emissions, and we're just going to do them on the SO1. And we're going to have to go through and we're going to have to fill all this out. But we can do, and I'll show you if it does not match what your maximum design rate is, your units. If your units don't match, it won't do any of the calculations for you. So we're going to say engineering judgment. We're going to say our potential is 2.5, but we're going to say that our annual total for these 4 units is 25 tons. So we're going to save that here. And we're going to click save. And then we're going to go down to 2.01 or 02.1, I'm sorry. And for our potential emissions here, we already had them listed for an example, but what you could do is you go through and you can do all these as 0, and then actually make a comment that accounted for in SO1.1 and click save. Again, we'll click save here, and then we'll go do the same thing for SO3.2. We'll say we'll associate potential emissions. And if you can see if you select permit or other here, you actually have a box to specify that. So we'll click 0, and again we'll say 0. And again, this stuff won't save because I don't have a maximum design rate. We'll just pick one. We'll pick an emission point. And we'll click save. Oh, see, we're missing a raw material. So again, it tells me that what I'm missing here in order to be able to move forward. And going through that, the associated HAPs works the same way as the potential emissions for criteria pollutants. So you are required. Again, here's another place where we have some that are required that aren't necessarily designated as mandated 1. Your raw material emission point is required to be associated with each Form 3, and at least 1 potential emissions for criteria pollutants is required. Otherwise, if your HAPs are not required, your control equipment, monitoring equipment, stuff like that are not mandatory fields. So we're saved successfully here. And I tried to click next, but it says that my emission unit is incomplete for S06. So that means I need to go into S06 and fix something. So you can see here that it's the raw material is missing, the maximum design rate, it doesn't have an emission point, doesn't have potential emissions. So we're going to close that, and we're actually going to uncheck that just so we kind of get past validation. So now when we click next, it let us move on because it won't validate that one form again. Next is our insignificant activities, our form 1.3. So you just start by add a new record. And you just put your potentials just like your form 1 in pounds per year. And if you need to do a second point, you can do this and just keep going through until you have all of them entered in. Just like, again, like Marnie said, insignificant activities are not included in Slice, so they won't be there. So you will have to go through and do it the first time. When you do calculate total, it will actually calculate all the totals for you. You can move on. Our form 1.4 is our potential HAP emissions. So you'll click this calculate emissions, and it will actually go in and grab whatever you've put in as your ton per year for each one of the emission units. This box is in case you have construction permit limits, facility-wide limits, maybe on your HAP emissions. So you can actually come in here and say you have a 9.4 ton per year individual HAP limit. You can actually come in and do this. And that'll let us know that's really what your potentials are. And then if you actually have a facility-wide limit on total HAPs, you can come in here and you can put a 24.4, and then that will we'll save that, and then all that information will be there. So you'll have your total that's calculated out by your Form 3s right here, and then your total that you decide to put in there that applies to the facility here. Form 1.3 works this, or 1.5, I'm sorry, works the same way. You do your calculated emissions, it will go and pull all that information from your Form 3.0s. But if you have, say, a 249 ton per year VOC limit, you can go in and put that in this box here. And that lets us know that there's a 249 limit. Here you'll go through and you'll select why you are subject to the Title V program. So we'll say potential to emit of 100 tons, and you'll see that this source is a major source actually popped in. And we'll click next. And now we've got our Part 2. This is currently referred to as our Part 2 General Facility Requirements form. It's a pretty straightforward form. You just go through and answer the questions. And as you answer the questions, there are places where additional questions will come up based on your answer, or additional forms may actually be required to be filled out based on your answers. So we're going to go through and answer these. There's no if you are, so you'll see here in question F, it asks for any Part 63 niche apps that you are, or that the facility is subject to. In order to list those, you'll go to Add New Record, and then there will be a drop-down list with all of the Part 63 niche apps. So you'll pick your individual or the applicable one. We'll say wood furniture, and make sure that you click this green check mark, and it will save it. You can go through and add as many of them as apply to the facility. This is your Part 61 niche app. NSPS works the same as the niche app. You'll go to Add New Record, and it'll come up with the list of all of the required, or all of the NSPSs, but we're going to just skip that for right now. Stratospheric ozone, you've got your acid rain questions, your cross-state air pollution, and so you'll see here, especially once I click no, it automatically clicked no for this next question, and you can't answer it. Your PSD questions. These next group of questions will determine either additional attachments that may be required or additional forms that may need to be filled out. So this would be if you're requesting any proposed limits in the Title V permit or alternate operating scenarios. We'll click no for that. For a boiler or process heater, we'll click yes, just so we can look at that form. Also for the engine information. For CAM plans, we'll click no, and compliance plans, we'll click no. And so we'll click next here. So here's our boiler and process heater form. Again, none of this information will be from Slice, so you'll have to start from new. You'll do your emission unit ID, emission point, control equipment if it exists. You'll select your fuel type. You'll put your rated capacity in. You'll pick what type of boiler subcategory it fits in, and then your commence construction date. This is all information that we use really it's for 5D applicability, but just the information that we need that is not provided elsewhere in the application. This would even count for stuff that you may feel counts for the insignificant list. So that's why we don't have like a drop down here of all the units at the facility, because it may actually be an insignificant unit. So click save, go to next, and this is our engine form. Same process here. Just click through the buttons as they apply to your engine. And it will actually change kind of some of the questions based on what you select elsewhere. And this date of construction is the actual date of construction that's defined in the subpart. That's really the date that you order the equipment. Is the engine certified? If yes, what tier number? And then if there's a control equipment, you can associate the control equipment, and then you can click save. And again, all that information is now here. We'll click next. Here's our attachments form. So there are forms that are required with every initial or renewal application. There's 3 of them. That is this process flow diagram, which is our old form 1.2. These can come, they can either come in the mail, or you can submit them online by uploading a document. You click upload. You can upload as many files as you need to, whether you have file, you can upload a single file. Otherwise, you can do mail. If you click mail, it will require you to send a signed form 1.0 with that attachment. And then you can describe the attachment here. CAM calculations, that's a spreadsheet that we have. You can actually follow this link here, and it will actually send you to the point where that to download that form to use. It's in a Microsoft Excel file. Just for time's sake, we're going to say mail. And part 2, we previously called our form the Part 2 emission point information form. We've noticed that caused a lot of confusion, because when you look at our form 2.0, that also is called an emission point information form. So we were getting a lot of confusion, and we were obviously confusing people as far as why we were asking for the same information twice. So we changed the name to emission point applicable requirements. All the same all the same forms, nothing has changed except the name. Now, if you may have received an email from Marnie a couple weeks back that when we changed this in the system, it didn't replace the emission point information form for applications that were created before February 5th. It just added an additional one, and they would both be required. So if you are in that situation and you come up with 2 required forms here, one that says Part 2 emission point information and one that says Part 2 emission point applicable requirements, just submit or upload one of them, and for the other one, just click mail. And then in this attachment, the appropriate or the required forms are associated with the other form name. That will not happen for anybody who created an application after February 5th. The rest of the attachment forms that are here are optional for, in this case, this application. So other is just whatever. If there's additional information that you want to provide, if there's a cover letter that you want to provide, you can upload that here. Phase 2 acid rain, that becomes required based on questions that you answer. Same thing with the certificate of conformity, proposed limits, stack test results, CAM plans, if those are required, you can submit those here, compliance plans, and calculations. Calculations forms are not necessarily required, but we encourage that they get submitted as anytime there's a little bit more calculation involved than just what the emission factor said. So like I said before, in the cases where you maybe created a combined emission factor to account for dual fuels, or if you didn't do a combined emission factor, how you came up with the total ton per year number, along those lines. So you can submit those. And again, just like in any of these, you can either upload multiple documents associated with a specific attachment, or you can do multiple or a single one. So like, especially for this emission point applicable requirements, you can do one combine them all as one. It really doesn't matter. So once you get everything accounted for there, I don't know why it's giving me this. Oh, because I didn't select. So you'll see here that it validates that I didn't do a method for this form that's required. Now it will let me go forward. This is your validation, your final validation screen. So if there was anything that was not complete somewhere in the application, you would have a red X next to that, and then it would tell you, and then you can click on this form and it'll actually take you to the form, and then that form will actually tell you what you're missing. So this is really your final check. And we've gotten questions before of how people can send application information to other people within the company that may need to review the application prior to it getting submitted. If they have an account that is associated with the facility, they should be able to come in and see any of, see the unfinished application and go through that way. Otherwise, you can actually go through on each one of these. It gives you a form view PDF of each one of the forms. You can save those forms and email them around as needed for other people to review. Unfortunately, we don't have a download all or download as a single file. It's, again, just the way the system works, but this is a good way, again, for other people who need to see the information prior to submittal to get at that information and make any corrections or comments or whatever they need to based on that information that was completed. So like I said, so we've got all green checkboxes here, and we are ready to go to submittal. So we'll click next. This is your application certification, certifying the truth, accuracy, and completeness and compliance of the facility. We have your security question and answer and your PIN. Again, if you are if you are a responsible official. If you are a preparer only, you will not see this screen. You will see essentially a button that will say, inform the responsible official that the application is ready for submittal. So you'll click that button and it will actually send a notification to the listed responsible official that this application is ready for their security question and PIN number. So since I'm listed as the responsible official for this facility, I was able to go in and do this. We'll click submit. While we're waiting for this to kind of work out, as soon as you start an application, that application will be given a submission ID. So that's something that you want to definitely pay attention to from the start, because you'll be able to track either where that application is at in your internal use, and I'll show you where to look at incomplete submittals in here in a little bit, and you can identify it by that submittal ID. And then once it is submitted to the DNR, you can track the process or the progress of your application as well by that submittal ID. So that's a very important piece of information that's there. And that submittal ID will be in notification emails that you get. It'll be in this final confirmation screen if it'll come up. Again, this is the test server, so things may not work as they do in real life. So this submission ID is very important for your use as you go forward. There it goes. So you'll see this submittal confirmation that will have all the information for who it was submitted by, the owner, what forms were part of it, the attachment detail. You'll see here that each one of these, it says we're going to submit those by mail. So that's what you've got. To track what you have submitted, you'll actually go to this track submissions. Under your submittal tab, you go to track submissions. And you'll see everything, any applications that you've submitted, and where they're at. So it will say, so this is the one we just did. So we'll have those outstanding mailed attachments. And then what task on DNR's side we're at. So the task here is assign completeness review. And that's how things work on our side. We have to do tasks, and as we complete tasks, it will update this review status. And once your application gets assigned to a permit writer for technical review, their name will be listed here in this review status. So one thing that another thing that I wanted to touch on was permit amendments. So say we're doing a completeness review and there's information that is incomplete or incorrect that needs to be fixed. Or as we're working on the technical review, there's additional information that needs to get submitted along with the application. Once the application is submitted, you can view the progress and you can view the submitted application, but you can't make changes to that submittal. So in order to make changes, DNR actually has to go in and release that application back to you. And so if that is the case, whether, like I said, we need to, the consultant was listed on the form 1.0, and that needs to be updated. We'll actually, in that case, if during the completeness review, we'll release it back to you. If it comes up to another time, you just get in contact with usually me or the permit writer that you're working with and ask them to release the application back to you to make changes, and we can do that. Once it gets released back to you, you can go to Edit Pending Submittals. And you'll see this one here that says, it's in bright red, and it says the status is amendment. So that means this one is available to make changes to. So you'll click here and edit application. And so the comments, when we typically send stuff back, we'll give you an idea of what needs to be done. And like in this case, I just said see the letter dated this date. So then you go to amend. From the DNR's place, we release back only really what is required in order or to make changes to. So we can go through and actually limit the amount of information that you can amend. So if you need to have decided you need to make changes to the application, you have to let us know exactly what needs to be changed so that we can release those specific forms back to you to make changes to. Because if we don't, then you can't make changes to it. You can't save those changes, and you'll have to get into a loop where you have to submit it, and then we have to re-release it back to. And the reason why we limit that and we don't just release the whole application to you is it prevents us from having to go through and figure out, because there is no history tool really to see what got changed. So in this case, the only form that I released back for this application was the Form 1. So in this case, I'm going to, we're going to change the zip code to 50315, even though that's not correct. We're just going to change it here in all of these cases. And so you'll see that we have a save button. And we get the information that we've saved successfully. Now you'll notice if I go to the form 2.0, so when I hit next, it went to attachments because that's the only other place where you can make any changes. So if I go here to the form 2.0, you can see that there is no save button. You can go in here and make any changes that you want, but you will not be able to save them. Attachments are really the only place where you can go in and attach additional files as the application process goes. We try not to do that as much as possible, but there are cases where that happens. And we're back at the validation screen and we're back at the submittal screen. So then the process is the exact same. The responsible official goes through, resubmits it. We're not going to do that. And then it will go and it will no longer be in your, we'll submit it just for fun. It'll go back into that track submission, track submissions. You'll see this is 50091. So it'll go right here and we're right back to where we were before. And then it'll be viewable on our side and we'll be able to continue. Last thing that I wanted to really address is modifications. As you saw in the slide that Marnie presented, modifications are a place where we're really behind on getting easier applications submitted. And we're constantly working to try and make it working with the system to try and make it easier and easier for you guys to do. So on your application type, you would click modification. And then you select your modification type. Administrative amendment, a minor permit mod, or a significant permit modification. This won't change necessarily how you fill out the application, but it will give us information on how to process the application going forward, just like on our paper forms where we asked for that information as well. Like I said before, here's where the application description becomes very important to kind of point us in the right direction for what changed and why you made the determination on what type of modification it is. And then our form 1 is just the same way that it was. All the rest of the forms are essentially the same going forward. Ask for the same information. We don't need to fill all this out. The form 1 is one form that it will save it as you go. So even if not all the required information is filled in, it will actually save it. There it goes. So we're saved successfully, but it's showing me all the places where information is lacking, but we're just going to move on. So like I said before, for your modifications, again, this is where your include in app checkbox becomes very important. One thing with modifications is you only have to submit the forms for the equipment that is changing as part of the modification. So if you got a new construction permit and let's say in this case, the permit for SO1.2 got changed. Modified as part of that construction permit. You don't have to include any Form 2s. So in order to, for right now, get this that checkbox gone, you have to select the box and then click unselect all, and it will unselect all of the equipment. We are working with the developer to not have these check boxes checked by default on modification applications. So it will make it easier that you just go through and select what needs to be done. So we'll click next. And again, so like I said, it says select all, you'll check that, and then you'll check unselect all. Now all of them are gone because we're going to say no control equipment changed as part of this. And no monitoring equipment was changed. But like I said, we're going to go with, and we're going to change the we're going to change the design rate to 100 million BTU an hour, and change our permit number to S1. And then we have to go, and then we'll have to change what our emissions are. So we'll see here if it updates it. Doesn't look like it. So by going in and retyping that emission factor, it redid the calculations based on the new maximum design rate. So we're going to click save there. And we're going to have to do it for every one of them. And if you'll see, I just, all I did was, I just deleted the 0 and went back, and well, it didn't take it. There it goes. So this is the only change that we're going to make to the application, is for this point. And so you'll see that our potentials are the same. And now we're going to go through and we're going to uncheck the emission units that are not affected by it. But remember, I said that you need to lay your eyes on each one of the forms, and I'm going to show you the reason why here in just a second. So we're going to skip over these two forms, and we're going to go to this boiler and process heater form. Now you'll see that we don't have the general requirements form here. That was another thing that we can only make it. We typically with modification applications, it doesn't change the general facility requirements. And even if it does, we're going to have you address that in the next renewal anyway. So we decided that it's just to make it a little bit simpler on the applicant, you would just bypass that form to begin with. But because that form has those questions about boiler and process heater information and engine information, we made it just automatically populate these two forms. But again, you only have to lay eyes on them. You don't have to fill anything out. And now the other thing that you'll see, again, to make it simpler, is there are no required attachments as part of a modification application. So you don't have to answer any of those questions. You can just move next. You'll see here where I didn't fill out my form 1.0. Here are all the things that I need to do in order to make sure that form 1.0 is complete. And if I click here, it'll take me there. But you'll also see that the form 1.4 and the 1.5 are included in this as not being complete. So I'm just going to click here. I'm not even going to reload emissions or change the calculation or the calculations or anything. I'm just going to click next. Same thing with a 1.5. And now I'm going to go back down to my validation, and you'll see it's only my form 1.0 information that's still listed here. My form 1.4 and 1.5 have a green check. So that's why I really like to point people at making sure to use the next button, so you at least lay eyes on each one of the forms. And then also so that you can unselect the appropriate pieces of equipment that don't need to be included in the modification. Hopefully that change will be coming soon, where those including app checks boxes won't automatically be filled by default. So that'll just make it one more step easier, that if you know only a form 3 needs to be changed, you fill out your form 1 and then you just click next through to your form 3, select the appropriate units, make those changes, click next through the rest of the process and get through it. We're not going to go to submission because you've already seen that, and it won't let me submit because of the validation. Even if I go to submission, it'll tell me that it won't let me do it because we have to pass validation, so it won't even let me submit. So that's really what I really wanted to cover as far as Title V applications go, from a renewal or initial standpoint, from the amendment process, and also from the modification process there.